Ladies and gentlemen, although the 11th hour in Europe passed some time ago, it is now the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and we are beginning our final session of this conference. And once again, I welcome to the podium the Executive Director of the International Churchill Society, Mr. Michael Bishop.
At the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 100 years ago today, the Great War came to an end. All around the world, people are pausing to reflect on the sacrifice of the nearly 10 million fighting men who fell in battle from 1914 to 1918, and the millions more who perished from famine and disease. The British government called it the Great War for Civilization, while others called it just a waste. Most historians now agree that it was a grim, bloody, but necessary struggle. But whatever your view, it shaped the world in which we live, as did no other event in modern history. It also shaped the career of Winston Churchill, who in turn shaped its conduct. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he played a central role in the opening phase of the war, which he would later call a drama never surpassed. After the Dardanelles disaster, he was banished from the cabinet and even fought at the front. But his talents brought him back to power as Minister of Munitions, in which post he served until the end of the war. Randolph Churchill will now share his great-grandfather's reflections on that unforgettable November day in 1918.
It was a few minutes before the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. I stood at the window of my room looking up Northumberland Avenue towards Trafalgar Square, waiting for Big Ben to tell that the war was over. My mind strayed back across the scarring years to the scene and emotions of the night at the Admiralty when I listened for these same chimes in order to give the signal of war against Germany to our fleet and squadrons across the world. And now all was over. The unarmed and untrained island nation, who with no defense but its navy had faced unquestionably the strongest manifestation of military power in human record, had completed the task. Our country had emerged from the ordeal alive and safe, its vast possessions intact, its war efforts still waxing, its institutions unshaken, its people and the empire united as never before. Victory had come after all the hazards and heartbreak in an absolute and unlimited form. All the kings and emperors with whom we had warred were in flight or exile. All their armies and fleets were destroyed or subdued. In this, Britain had borne a notable part and done her best from first to last. The minutes passed. I was conscious of reaction rather than elation. The material purpose on which one's work had been centered, every process of thought on which one had lived, crumbled into nothing. the whole vast business of supply, the growing outputs, the careful hoards, the secret future plans. But yesterday, the whole duty of life, all at a stroke, vanished like a nightmare dream, leaving a void behind. My mind mechanically persisted in exploring the problems of demobilization. What was to happen to our 3 million munition workers? What would they make now? How would the roaring factories be converted? How, in fact, our swords beaten into plowshares? How long would it take to bring the armies home? What would they do when they got home? And then suddenly the first stroke of the chime. I looked again at the broad street beneath me. It was deserted. From the portals of one of the large hotels absorbed by government departments darted the slight figure of a girl clerk, distractedly gesticulating while another stroke of Big Ben resounded. Then from all sides, men and women came scurrying into the street. Streams of people poured out of all the buildings. The bells of London began to clash. Northumberland Avenue was crowded with people in hundreds, nay thousands, rushing hither and thither in a frantic manner, shouting and screaming with joy. I could see that Trafalgar Square was already swarming. All around me in our very headquarters in the Hotel Metropole, disorder had broken out, doors banged, feet clattered down the corridors. Everyone rose from the desk and cast aside pen and paper. All bounds were broken. The tumult grew. It grew like a gale, but from all sides simultaneously. The street was now a seething mass of humanity. Flags appeared as if by magic. Streams of men and women flowed from the embankment. They mingled with torrents pouring down the Strand on their way to acclaim the King. Almost before the last stroke of the clock had died away, the strict, war-straightened, regulated streets of London had become a triumph of pandemonium. At any rate, it was clear that no more work would be done that day. Yes, the chains which had held the world were broken. Links of imperative need, links of discipline, links of brute force, links of self-sacrifice, links of terror, links of honor which had held our nation, nay, the greater part of mankind, to grinding toil, to a compulsive cause. Everyone had snapped a few strokes on the clock. Safety, freedom, peace, home, the dear one back at the far side, all after 52 months of gaunt distortion. After 52 months of making burdens grievous to be borne and binding them on men's backs. At last, all at once, suddenly and everywhere, the burdens were cast down.
And now, Brough Scott, famed jockey, sports commentator, and author of Churchill at the Gallop, will share his reflections on his grandfather Jack Seeley, later the Right Honourable the Lord Modestone, Churchill's close friend and colleague, and a hero of the Great War.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. I thought on this Remembrance Sunday, it's worth recalling that of all Winston Churchill's amazing qualities, his commitment to friendship was one of the most appealing. Churchill had and kept family friends, political friends, literary friends, artistic friends, and heroic friends. My grandfather, Jack Seeley, was one of those great heroic friends, one of what Andrew Roberts in his wonderful new book calls his paladins. Jack Seeley was no Churchill, but he was a pretty fine and very courageous human being in his own right, and the only former senior cabinet minister to have fought on the Western Front in each of the 5 years of the Great War. Seeley knew Churchill for 50 years, and in 1913 and 14 was Secretary of State for War when Churchill was First Lord of the Admiralty, and appropriately this armistice centenary was particularly close to Churchill in the dark days of World War I. So today I thought I would read you two letters, not from the front, but to the front. They are from Winston in Westminster to Seeley, first near Ypres and then on the Somme. And the dates are significant, as is their context. The first here is from September 1915. The Dardanelles adventure has gone disastrously wrong, and Churchill, as the perceived villain of the peace, has been moved from the Admiralty to the fairly nebulous position of Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and his spirits are at their lowest ever ebb. He writes, "My dear Jack, it is odious to me to remain here watching sloth and folly with full knowledge and no occupation. I was very touched by the great kindness of your letter." Jack Seeley had written him a letter of sympathy from Festubert, Kemmel, where he'd been in the trenches for the last 2 months. "I was very touched by the great kindness of your letter. I hope you'll not go beyond the line of duty sportingly conceived in going into danger. Do not seek peril beyond what is necessary to discharge your full task, and do not get Archie," that's Archie Sinclair, Seeley's ADC and a protege of Churchill's, "do not get Archie into trouble. God bless you and guard you both is the hope of your faithful friend, Winston." The words have such feeling because Churchill had seen peril up close. His trousers had been soaked in blood fighting off Pathan tribesmen on the northwest frontier. He had killed 3 dervishes in 30 seconds at the brutal climax of the cavalry charge at Omdurman. And he'd, down in the South African War, he'd dodged bullets and moved corpses at Spee and Kop and other places. Winston Churchill understood the reality of war, and in the end of 1915, he actually went to war. He went to the front to find refuge there. And in fact, in December 1916, he spent a day at Kemmel, near the front, with Seeley and Sinclair, bombarding them with questions before taking over a battalion of the Royal Scots Fusiliers. And then in January, he had Sinclair as his own ADC then, and in January, he brought Jack Seeley over to present the prizes and play the piano at a sports day and a concert which Winston had organised to lift the morale of the troops. Seeley stayed on in France until being gassed in 1918, but Churchill returned to Westminster, but not at first to power, which brings us to the second letter. "My dear Jack," he wrote bitterly in 1916, "let me know if there is any way in which I can serve you. It is very painful to me to be impotent and inactive at this time, but perhaps later I may find a chance to be useful. Your devoted friend, Winston. Fortunately for the Western world, that last phrase, perhaps I may find a chance to be useful, turned out to be one of the understatements of the century. Asquith's daughter, Violet Bonham Carter, had the best analysis. Winston's friendship, she wrote, was a stronghold against which the gates of hell could not prevail. There was an absolute quality about its loyalty, known only to those safe within its walls. For 50 years, Jack Seeley was within that stronghold. How much on this Remembrance Day would all of us have loved to have been within that stronghold too? Thank you very much.
And now, let us welcome Minnie Churchill, Christopher Hebb, and Jenny Churchill, who will read 3 of the seminal British and Canadian poems of the Great War.
The Soldier by Rupert Brooke. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by the sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less gives somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our places. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard, amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunsets glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up the quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
For the Fallen by Laurence. With proud thanksgiving, a mother for her children, England mourns for her dead across the sea. Flesh of her flesh they were, spirit of her spirit, fallen in the cause of the free. Solemn the drums thrill, death august and royal, sings sorrow up into immortal spheres. There is music in the midst of desolation, and a glory that shines upon our tears. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, and against odds uncounted, they fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years contemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. They mingle not with their laughing comrades again. They sit no more at familiar tables at home. They have no lot in our labor of the daytime. They sleep beyond England's foam. But where our desires are and our hopes profound, felt as a wellspring that is hidden from sight, to the innermost heart of their own land they are known, as the stars are known to the night. As the stars that shall be bright when we are dust, moving in marches upon the heavenly plain, as the stars that are starry in the time of our darkness, to the end they remain.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for a moment of silence, to be followed by the last post, which will conclude our observance. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. And now our chairman, Laurence, will deliver the closing remarks for the 35th International Churchill Conference.
Remembrance Day reminds us of what really matters. It cannot fail to encourage us to make the most of the present and work hard to build a better tomorrow. The lessons of the Great War are not just about political short-sightedness or strategic error. They're much more. They're about being grateful for the freedoms we enjoy and reminding us those freedoms are not an automatic right. Those rights were hard won. They were contested. They were defended and were the cause of several just wars. When memorials to the loss of these gruesome wars were laid, there was terrible grief. But there was also pride. Pride that ever grew. Pride that our nations had defended freedom, justice and liberty, and had defeated the ambitions of perfidious dictators. Stopping once a year to remember the sacrifice of previous generations surely reminds us how lucky we are, but it also challenges us to ask, would we be ready to do all of that again? Have we the mettle of our fathers and our grandfathers? Has our cynicism and complacency and our home creature comforts eroded our innate sense of duty? The task of modern statesmanship is to ensure that we have, by diplomacy, by pragmatism, a strong defense. But more importantly, I believe, diplomacy keeps us aware that we mustn't start down that awful, slippery slope of endless compromise of our fundamental ideals, beliefs, and values. For we are Churchillians. And for whatever reason each of you are here, we are Churchillians, and we have to learn and have learned from Churchill's life, his mistakes, his failures, his successes, his victories, his outstanding and astonishing resilience, but above all, his values. If we've learned anything from this conference, it's that freedom-loving democracies are capable of producing courageous, selfless men and women. We've learned that nothing is worth sacrificing our fundamental beliefs, our values, and our ideals. Because that strength of character that we've learned from Churchill can and must be translated into strength of action. We've learned from the past 2 days that pandering to the temporal whim of dictators is fool's gold. And the result will never be victory, but will be shame. Always shame. We've had a wonderful conference. Scholarship, education, illumination, fellowship, and a reaffirmation of not only the incredible achievements of Britain's and America's finest son, for we share him, but crucially the need for unswerving belief in the democratic values, and always to be wary of their gradual erosion. We've learnt we mustn't pander. We learnt we can't be silent, for our mission is clear. And we are on our way to continue the endless path of achieving our mission with each and all of your help. We will not be silent. We can't rest and we can't fail in our mission. We continue to toil and follow along a path. Sometimes we're laughed at, sometimes we're looked at anachronistic. But that path of freedom, Churchill's path of democracy, justice, liberty and self-respect for all individuals, is a worthy path. And as I say, each of us must follow that path in our own ways, but it is a common thread. And our conferences, our education programs, our outreach, our interview series, our communications are our weapons to take us along the path and to remind us why we're all here. But it's all of you that are the real players. It's your involvement, your participation, your action, your beliefs and your generosity. Yes, I know I keep saying that make this effort not just the labor and passion of a few, but of us all, and make it worthwhile to be Churchillians. So all I'm going to ask you is give us the tools and we'll finish the job. Thank you for coming. I forgot. I have one last duty. The conference is adjourned.